What's up, faithful? 49ers Web Zone No Huddle podcast, now partnered with Odyssey. I'm Al Sacco. He's Brian Rennick. And Brian, before we get into any football, I want to say congratulations to Aaron Judge. We're recording this on a Wednesday night. He just hit his 61st home run. Current New York Yankee, hopefully never future San Francisco Giant. Hopefully always current New York Yankee, Aaron Judge. It's a cool feat. Listen, the steroid era happened. People can have whatever judgments they want to on anything. I will say this in terms of the best baseball seasons I've seen. When Bonds had 73, Sosa had 64. So that's a 9 home run difference. Mm-hmm. Judge currently got 61, and Kyle Schwarber, I think, is behind him, and he's got 42. That's 19. So in terms of eras, this is arguably the most impressive offensive season based on that. It's been cool to watch as a Yankee fan.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. It feels like home runs are kind of down across the league, and so to see someone do something like this, especially when they introduced a baseball or at least humidors at every park, which was supposed to deaden the ball a little bit, and it seems like it has. And here we go with the kid from Northern California. So that's two for Northern California. Two home run champs, if you will. So
you guys can claim part of them, I guess. Part of them.
That's right. Big time accomplishment from Aaron.
What else?
Get another one.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely, a few more. So you know what else is down scoring wise? And I saw this today, or maybe the other day. Do you know in the NFL there's only 12 teams that have more than 4 touchdown passes? That have 5.
I saw you tweet that out earlier.
I felt like scoring was down, but I didn't think that's crazy. And the Niners only have 2, and I think there's 5 other teams that only have 2. But it's pretty. It's. And I know now without there's less preseason games, and I feel like teams are kind of sitting their starters more than they have in the past. Like some teams didn't play starters hardly at all. And maybe it's just taking teams longer and longer to get going now. And assuming we get into October, scoring is going to be up again. But it's crazy. Yeah. The Chiefs only scored 24 points. You have a Packers-Bucks game, 14-12. The Niners, 11-10. These games have been low scoring. And I like a low scoring defensive game, but it's good to see some fireworks too.
It's interesting too, because we're talking about a sport in the NFL, which literally every game matters in terms of playoffs in the future, right? Mm-hmm. And the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs could be one loss, and I know that's the case with every sport. But when you've got a sport like baseball with 162, and you've got a sport like basketball with 82, and then you've got a sport like the NFL with 17, it's just 17 games. The fact that for whatever reason, and I imagine it's because of the collective bargaining agreement and players trying their best to preserve their bodies, and so less practice time and now less preseason. The fact that teams treat like the first 4 games of the season now almost as preseason is kind of, it's interesting to me, because again, if you go 1-3 in the first 4 games because you're trying to work out all the kinks, you might miss the playoffs, right? And that's where we are right now, right? As 49er fans, our team is 1-2 going into a game against the defending Super Bowl champions. If they lose this game, they're going to be 1-3.
It's a huge game.
It's a huge game, right? And so it is. I agree with you. It's offense is down across the league, and I think it's because of that. Now, the NFL is crazy, because last week I was like, there's 0 chance that the Colts have any shot at beating the Chiefs, and here we are with the Colts having beaten the Chiefs after getting boat raced and shut out by the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, by the way, looked pretty awesome on Sunday against the Chargers as well. Which I'm a little bummed about, because that's a Trent Baalke feather, right? And Trent Baalke doesn't need any feathers.
Give him time; he'll screw it up.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Unless the quarterback's good enough where it doesn't matter, which is a possibility. But yeah, if not, I'm sure there'll be an AJ Jenkins in the mix somewhere there. So
yes. So we'll see. But yeah, it's an interesting trend, right? And it's worth monitoring, at least in my opinion.
Definitely. In this game, it's so huge for the Niners, and we'll preview it in a little bit. But with the Niners, there's always drama, right? And that's what kind of in a sick way, just love that about this team, right? Not because we do content, it makes everything interesting all the time, but it's like
it does make it easier.
Dude, it's like a soap opera, man. They're reality TV. Yeah, and it does make it easier. Like I feel like you were never ever strapped for things to talk about. And even this week, and sometimes things will happen, Brian, and I'm like, do I even want to address it? But people are talking about it. So what the hell? The lip reading thing that I'm sure you see on Twitter, where there's the clip of Jimmy where it looks like he says, "Oh, what was
plays,
it? Like, plays
suck, man,"
or something like that." And nobody knows what he said. And let me say this. He is not, if he did say that, he is far from the only football player to get pissed about a play call. Or, I mean, it probably happens weekly, right? I mean, you've seen Antonio Brown take his uniform off and run off the field. This is nothing. I think it's a complete nothing burger. But it's interesting in the sense to talk about, is there going to be at some point, if losses pile up or just whatever, some kind of Kyle Shanahan, Jimmy Garoppolo rift? And that's not to start drama. That is the people who would say like, oh, he's a professional. He didn't care that they replaced him and they tried to get rid of him. Jimmy is a professional football player who took a team to a Super Bowl. I'm sure he has a lot of pride. I'm sure he's been a successful athlete his whole life. Nobody would brush that off. There's got to be, even if it's a small chip, there has to be a chip on that shoulder. So I'm sure, Jimmy had a really rough game, and we talked about it ad nauseum in our last show. But there's got to be something there where he's, I'm sure he wants to shove the ball up everybody's ass. I'm sure he does. And I'm sure week 3 did not sit well with him. So I don't know if there's anything to what he said. And like I said, I'm sure a lot of people say that. But you do have to wonder at some point, they got to start getting some wins, because if the pressure mounts, maybe it will turn into more of a soap opera. I don't know.
Yeah. I always bristle at this idea of, oh, they're a professional. Everybody's a professional, right? But everybody's also a human being. And to say this guy's a professional is to completely discount the human side of being a human being. Like, think about in your job, right? Listeners, viewers right now, think about it, your job, right? If you were at your job and your boss actively tried to replace you for 3 years, and then also brought in a guy and was like, hey, by the way, this is the guy or the girl that's gonna replace you. So and what I would like you to do is help him get ready to replace you, right? Think about that situation for a moment. Put yourself in that situation, regardless of context. I don't think that's going to sit well with you. And I'm fairly certain that didn't sit well with Jimmy Garoppolo. And so it seems like it would just be natural for there to be a rift, right? Regardless, this is the guy that has tried to replace him since the end of the Super Bowl. There was the flirtation with Tom Brady. There was then the following offseason, the flirtation with Matthew Stafford, the flirtation with Deshaun Watson, and then eventually the drafting of Trey Lance. And then there was the giving of the QB1 title to Trey Lance after last season, in which you took the team to the NFC Championship game. I don't care how professional you are. You're going to be pissed. You're going to be upset. And now, all of a sudden, that kid who you're not mad at, I don't think he's mad at Trey. Trey didn't do anything to him, right?
Right.
But that kid gets injured, and now the guy that replaced you is going, hey, by the way, hey, could you come back and do that job again that I had you do that I didn't want you to do anymore? Could you do that again for me? And not only that, but could you do that at a high level? For sure. I'm certain that there is a rift. It doesn't mean that it's going to negatively affect the team, but I feel like it's just natural, right? It's just natural, regardless of how professional he is. And so, Al, I want to ask you a question about Jimmy Garoppolo and this entire situation. I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday. We were lamenting that game, and we were talking about Jimmy and kind of where do we go from here. And I think we had talked about, at least on this show, we had said something along the lines of Jimmy Garoppolo has nothing to lose this season, and he's playing for a new contract, and he's auditioning for new teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that enough for him to overcome what I would have to assume is a lack of caring for what happens to this team this year? Do you think Jimmy Garoppolo is bought in to the 49ers and the 49ers season after what he's been through since the end of the Super Bowl?
Well, yeah, and one thing you did a good recap, but one thing you didn't mention is that even in training camp, they just, hey, here, go practice on this field over there.
Right.
You don't
Please get away from us.
Now, did you ever see Office Space, the movie Office
Yeah,
Space?
for sure.
What was it, Milton, where they put him in the basement?
Yeah, put him in the basement.
That's what they did. Like, that's what, hey, you go in the basement, and we're gonna take your stapler,
Yeah.
and like, are you gonna burn the place down now?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
I think the way that I look at it is, if he was playing for Kyle Shanahan and was on the field with Kyle Shanahan, there may be some of that, FU stuff going on, but he's there. He's still going to be there for his teammates. I think there's a good relationship there with a lot of his teammates. He has some close friends that he apparently doesn't text back. No, I'm kidding. But he has some close friends on there, with Juszczyk and Kittle and guys like that. And he's gone to battle with those guys, and those guys have gone to battle with him. I don't think there's going to be any of that because of his teammates. I don't see it that way. The only thing I can see if things start to blow up is if what happened last week continues. And what I mean by that is, open receivers and him just playing god awful, and the defense out there, every possession, just blood, sweat, and tears until they can't give any more. And, they give up a drive at the end. Then you maybe can see a rift, but I don't think Jimmy's going to play that bad again. Maybe he's still going to be rusty for a week or two. I think he'll get better, but I still think he's going to be Jimmy. I still think the frustrations are going to be there. I still think he's not going to push the ball downfield. I still think he's going to throw the stupid interception. I was watching the film of the pick that he threw, and I put this on Twitter too, a picture of it. If you see it and you see the 3 Bronco defenders just cradled around Debo, it was 1st and 10, Brian, on their own 48. They were about to get a game-winning field goal. It was 1st down. It's not like it's 4th down and they were forcing the ball. It's 1st down. Throw the ball away. Take a sack. Whatever. You cannot turn it over there.
Exactly.
So it was the worst decision possible. But no, I just think it was partially rust. I don't think he's going to mentally check out on his teammates. No, I would be shocked if that happened.
Here's what I don't understand. Jimmy Garoppolo played damn near the whole game against the Seahawks. Right? He came in midway through the first quarter and looked great, and came to the presser and was like, you know what? It's like riding a bike, right? Like that's what it felt like. It's like riding a bike. And then he goes out and lays that turd in Mile High, right? Sorry, I figured it out. It's Empire Field at Mile High. That's what it is.
I'll never remember that.
Whatever, right? And then he comes to the podium and he's like, listen, like, I don't want to make excuses, but I haven't played with these guys, blah, 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 right? So you went from riding a bike to what happened on Sunday. And what is the difference? I mean, is the difference still that he went out there against the Seahawks and played loose, and now that he's QB1, he's not playing loose? Does that have something to do with him, or does that have something to do with Kyle Shanahan? And I think that's a valid question. I've often thought of Kyle Shanahan and the way that he treats his quarterback. It's like Kyle Shanahan plays Madden on the sideline, and he wants the quarterback to do exactly what Kyle Shanahan would do, right? And when he doesn't, he gets mad. And I don't know that Jimmy Garoppolo plays his best when he's being micromanaged that way. Now, I'm not trying to lay all the blame on Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan is the one that calls the plays. Jimmy Garoppolo has to execute them. But is he in Jimmy's ear going like, hey, remember, first read here, throw it, boom, it's going to be open. I've heard him on the sideline say things like that, when he's mic'd up and things. So is that really the difference? Is that against the Seahawks, he wasn't doing that because he had this entire game plan for Trey, and so both of them just had to wing it? Possibly. But that offense looked a lot better when they were both winging it than it did when they had a week to game plan for now an obviously better defense than the Seattle Seahawks. But still, that offensive performance, none of it looked good. And We have a comment here that says Jimmy G can't see any open wide receivers last game. I agree. I mean, there's plenty of film out there that shows, right? That shows plenty of missed yards, plenty of missed touchdowns. Agreed. He does. But he wasn't against the Seahawks. So again, it's such a weird disconnect for me between that game and the Denver game. Because like I said, he played the majority of the game against the Seahawks.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know. I don't think that he would quit on his teammates, like you said, especially because he has a great relationship with a lot of them, especially in the offensive side of the ball. But I will say, like you did, Richard Sherman had KJ Wright on his podcast last week, and they were teammates in Seattle, part of the Legion of Boom defense, right? And they talked about essentially why they don't like Russell Wilson. And what they said was Russell Wilson got more of the credit than they did, when in reality it was that defense that led that team to the Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
And Pete Carroll treated Russell Wilson differently than he did the rest of the team, right? Very similar to Kyle Shanahan, not putting any accountability on Jimmy Garoppolo. In fact, defending him, right? Blaming the fumble on Jake Brendel, and just essentially not calling out his quarterback for really bad play. Called himself out, which I thought was great and was growth on his part. But like you said, if the defense continues to put performances on the field like they have the past 3 weeks, and they're not winning the majority of those games, that defense is bound to start to get a little chippy, if you will, with the offense and with Jimmy Garoppolo.
And I got to throw this stat out at you. I'm crazy. Like, I don't know what most people think about inside their head. I'm constantly thinking about like football. Like when I'm just sitting there driving or something, I'm thinking about random things. And one thing I thought about was, because there's all these turnovers with Jimmy, and I wanted to go back and look at Kyle. He's been coaching for a really long time and see if there's, a pattern there. So now, and this is his 6th year with the team, and this is 84 regular season games for him. The Niners have thrown 81 interceptions. In Kyle Shanahan's career as an OC and head coach, he's played 228 regular season games. His quarterbacks have thrown 228 interceptions. So basically an interception a game.
Wow.
The best years were Matt Ryan in 2016. He only threw 7.
MVP Matt Ryan.
And that seemed like a year where a quarterback had sort of mastered his offense. In 2012 with RG3 with 8, where he didn't throw a lot. And that was one of Kyle's other really good offensive years. So that's really interesting. Is it just the offense because they throw a lot in the middle of the field? Is it because Kyle's offense is complicated? Is it, quarterbacks are trying to play like a robot? I don't know, but it's a trend. It's a trend. And again, that doesn't make him, I'm not saying he's a bad coach because of that, but it is a trend that in this offense, quarterbacks turn the ball over. It's a fact over 14 years.
It is. But I here's my one counter to that, or at least my thought on why that might be the case. Outside of Matt Ryan, Kyle Shanahan really hasn't had very good quarterbacks.
True.
And I think that's part of it. Now, who's choosing the quarterbacks? Kyle Shanahan. So there is some culpability there on his part, because he's the one that's choosing them, right? He's the one that brought Brian Hoyer here. He's the one that brought CJ Beathard here. Right. Rich Scangarella was the one that really caped for Nick Mullins and got Nick Mullins here, but he was still the one that kept Nick Mullins, right? And he's the one that chose Jimmy Garoppolo. He's the one that chose Trey Lance, and now he's the one that chose Brock Purdy. So I have to wonder if he had a more talented quarterback in the vein of Matt Ryan, right? Because he only had Matt Ryan for 2 seasons. Right. He had him the first season and they were okay. And Matt Ryan was getting used to the offense. And then because Matt Ryan is a borderline Hall of Fame quarterback, he mastered that offense by year 2 and just like gangbusters. Right. So perhaps, and this is why Trey Lance is so exciting, because it's like Kyle Shanahan really has had one good quarterback in all of the years that he has coordinated an offense. And I guess you could say rookie year RG3, because he was rookie of the year, and he played really well. But that wasn't the Kyle Shanahan offense. That was Kyle Shanahan adapting the Baylor offense to the NFL for RG3 to run.
Mm-hmm.
So when Kyle Shanahan is running his offense, he's had one elite level quarterback, and that's Matt Ryan. And then you saw what happened. Now, granted, they also had Julio Jones, which helps, right?
Right.
Any team with prime Julio Jones is probably going to be pretty good throwing the ball. But I have to think it's more quarterback play, because he does dial up a lot of plays that are going to go to the middle of the field, where you tend to have more interceptions, right? Tipped balls,
Sure.
just more traffic.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that's what it is. And I would just love to see him with a more talented quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Jimmy Garoppolo is, I got in an argument with a guy on Twitter today, and that was my bad. I probably shouldn't have done that, but I called Jimmy Garoppolo mediocre at best, and he vehemently disagreed. But I mean, mediocre is average, right? That's what it means. So that's what Jimmy Garoppolo is. He has one elite trait, and that's his quick release. And outside of that, not a whole lot that's elite about him. That's where Trey Lance comes in. Trey Lance has elite arm strength. He has, elite athleticism, not necessarily Lamar Jackson athleticism, but still elite athleticism, and decent, which can get better, deep accuracy, right? Which again, we know Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't. So I would love to see that. I would love to see Kyle Shanahan and an offense in San Francisco with a better quarterback. And hopefully that's what we see next year in year 3 with Trey Lance. But man, I don't know where we go from here, Al. I keep thinking about this game on Monday, and we'll get to it here in a second, but I can't figure out a way for this offense to get to like 20 points right now. And that's pretty depressing.
Yeah. And I want to say one thing, and this is going to be in defense of Kyle and maybe a detriment to Jimmy. So we talked about the quarterbacks, and that Kyle hasn't had really only a really good quarterback he's had is Matt Ryan. Another thing he hasn't had is a quarterback in his system for a period of time.
Sure.
So if you look back to where he was in Houston for 2 years. So he had Matt Schaub for 2 years, who did probably have his 2 best years under Kyle. Then in Washington, he was there for 4 years, and you were Rex Grossman, whatever was left of Donovan McNabb, RG3. He had Kirk Cousins for a few games. But it was kind of all over the place, right, for those 4 years. He was Cleveland for 1 year, which was Hoyer and Manziel for a couple of years. Yep. Atlanta for 2. In the second year, we saw peak Matt Ryan. And he's been for the Niners now. This is his 6th year. Now, there hasn't really been an answer at quarterback because Jimmy's been hurt a lot, but Jimmy has been in the system for a really long time. So that's more of a detriment to Jimmy, I think, than Kyle, that Jimmy is not mastering this offense. Is he functioning in it? I guess he's functioning enough, but he's not mastering it. And he hasn't taken, maybe he'll never be Matt Ryan, but he hasn't taken a jump whatever his peak is. He hasn't taken that jump. He's kind of just been the same dude. So now that I'm thinking about that, that's actually a really good way to look at it. He's the first quarterback Kyle's really had for a long time, and he has hit a plateau. And whether that's Jimmy's fault or Kyle's fault or a little bit in between, whatever it is, Jimmy has not taken that next step like Matt Ryan did in just year 2. Jimmy's in year 5, year 6, really, right? And he hasn't.
Yeah, I mean, you got to count. And not only that, but he had a full season with Mike Shanahan and as his personal tutor to get him up to speed on the offense when he was recovering from his knee injury, right? He quite literally had one-on-ones often with Mike Shanahan to just digest this offense. And here's the frustrating part about the Jimmy Garoppolo experience is watching film or even watching the game and going, there he is, right? And pointing out the guy that's wide the hell open, and Jimmy is nowhere near looking at that guy, right? And Kyle Shanahan's offense is predicated on high-low concepts, right? His passing offense. There's levels to it, right? There's going to be the shallow, the mid, and the deep, right? He's got all of that in almost every pass play. And more often than not, that deep route tends to get open. And now part of that, I think, is defenses just not respecting Jimmy Garoppolo and not even worrying about him throwing deep because he just doesn't. There isn't that there isn't enough on film for them to think, hey, we got to worry about that. And so you saw it against Denver, right? Denver stacked the box, crowded the middle of the field, and then their safeties jumped on every intermediate route and let the deep routes go, right? Which is why Deebo Samuel runs open. That's why Brandon Ayuk runs open. It's why, and you see them, and Jimmy is already off of that. He's already off it and moving. And so my question is part of why Jimmy Garoppolo is part of why he hasn't progressed and gotten better in this offense is just because he doesn't have the processing ability necessary to. That's one of the strengths of Trey Lance.
Yep.
That's one of his strengths, right? Is his football mind, his football IQ, his processing speed. Steve Young called him an elite processor, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna trust Steve Young's opinion, right? I feel like he's earned that, you know.
Absolutely.
But I think that's part of the issue. And so if he can't process at the speed and that he needs to in this offense, then he is going to plateau, because all he's ever going to be able to do is hit those checkdowns and those intermediates when they do come open. And if they're not, then he's just hitting checkdowns and we're getting, 3, 4, 5 yards in the passing game when you could be getting chunk plays, which is what I think Kyle Shanahan wants, right? That's why he drafted Trey Lance. He wants those chunk plays. And so I think that is, again, part of the issue for Garoppolo in this offense.
Yeah, and that's just it. Maybe Jimmy just doesn't mentally have it. We talk about his physical limitations, but maybe he just mentally doesn't process well. Or maybe he can just process, certain aspects of it. Like maybe he's just plateaued. Like that's just it. He's at his peak. That's it. It is what it is. So, but that's that's really interesting. Kyle hasn't had a chance to really develop for a long period of time at QB other than Garoppolo.
Right.
So Lance is going to be, you would hope, his next chance to do that. So we'll see. We'll see, man. Brian, we're gonna. How many things do we have on our agenda today? And we've gotten through one of them.
We've got 2 more, right? We've got 2 more. So before we get to those 2, support for the No Huddle podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below the waist grooming. Their products are precision engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped Performance Package is the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Join over 6 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code NOHUDDLE at manscaped.com. Again, that's 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code NOHUDDLE at manscaped.com. The Manscaped Performance Package comes with the Lawnmower 4.0, which is the precision tool for your family jewels. It also comes with the Weed Whacker, which is a nose and ear hair trimmer. And if you're getting up there in age, and I am as well, I've had to trim those nose hairs quite a bit. It also comes with a pair of very comfortable boxer briefs and a t-shirt that talks about balls, right? Who doesn't want one of those? So again, 20% off at Manscaped with promo code NOHUDDLE at checkout.
All right, Brian, and the other thing we wanted to get to before we preview the game is, does this team miss Mike McDaniel? A coach who's been with Kyle Shanahan for 20 years.
Every stop, everywhere that he's called plays, Mike McDaniel has been there with him.
An integral part of his coaching staff who had a lot to do with the run design.
Mm-hmm.
We see what he's doing right now in Miami. And look, Miami could maybe be 1-2. We'll see how good they really are, but still.
Sure.
There's been some, there's excitement there, and he's done a good job there, and he's made a quarterback Tua better than people thought he would be so far. And now Kyle's relying on newer guys like Clay Kubiak.
The run game coordinator now is Chris Furster, who's the offensive line coach. He has that official run game coordinator title.
Yeah,
but you know who else?
Lynn is there too, helping out too as well. So he's got new guys around him.
Yeah, and also when it comes to the running game and running backs in general, Bobby Turner isn't there this year, right? And Anthony Lynn is, and Anthony Lynn is a Shanahan guy. He played for Mike Shanahan in Denver. He coached with Mike Shanahan. I was actually really thrilled when they made that hire, but the running game has not gotten off to a good start at all. And you could attribute that to Elijah Mitchell's injury, but even still, there's talent in that room. It should be better, and it's not. And so I don't know. It's hard. Like I said, and you mentioned it. He's been with Kyle Shanahan at every stop. This is the first time we've seen Kyle Shanahan coordinate an offense without Mike McDaniel. Yep. And through 3 games, it's looked really bad. Not even kind of good, really bad. And the offense in Miami has actually looked really good.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think McDaniel has that Kyle Shanahan doesn't is a little bit more of aggressive nature, which I like, and I like seeing, right? He's going for it more, and he's calling more aggressive plays. I would like to see Kyle Shanahan get more aggressive. I think he's way too passive and way too reserved. And oftentimes, especially when he gets a lead, he's playing not to lose. And we've seen what happens when he plays that way.
And he's done he's done that pretty much his whole time here. And Deebo Samuel credited Mike McDaniel sort of with his career, right? Mm-hmm. He did a lot for him. And now you're seeing Deebo, these runs aren't really working. And I think it was Guy Haberman, want to give him credit, who said last year they had the curveball with Deebo. And now everybody knows they could sit on that curveball. I'm paraphrasing what he said.
Yeah.
This year they were going to have a slide. They put in the slider, which was Lance and Deebo, and they could do different things. And now that's not there anymore. So he's got to kind of go back. Jimmy doesn't obviously give that 11-on-11 football threat because he's not running anywhere unless it's a QB sneak. So now that threat,
he is elite at those.
He is really good at those. Yeah, I'll give him credit at that. He's a really good QB sneaker. But now you have Deebo's, these runs aren't working. So is Kyle going to go back in the lab and try to figure something else out? Another thing you have is Brian Griese. He has to, right? Brian Griese, who they pulled out of the announcers booth to be the coach. Time will tell. I'm not going to knock Brian Griese yet. We don't know. We don't know yet. But there's all these new coaches around. That may be part of it, where they're feeling each other out. That could definitely have something to do with it. But yeah, something's not right now.
Something isn't clicking.
Right. And it could still. Look, we just talked about it. It's not clicking around the league. So maybe in 3 weeks, we're like, hey, remember when we thought that we were worried about this offense? They're putting up 28 points a game now. Could happen. Could absolutely happen. We'll have to wait and see. But also, Brian, the Rams offense is also struggling as we get into looking into this game. I was actually kind of surprised when I was looking at some of this stuff. I mean, Stafford's throwing 5 interceptions. They've turned the ball over. Yeah, they turned the ball over 7 times as an offense right now. They're not running the ball at all. Cam Akers has had a tough time coming back, just 3.5 yards per carry. Darrell Henderson's at 4.1 yards per carry. And even just in terms of them throwing the ball, Allen Robinson has done nothing. 7 catches.
My fantasy teams are aware.
Right. And he was supposed to be like, he's going to come in with an Odell role and everything else.
Yeah.
Ben Skoranek has been their second best wide receiver. Tyler Higbee is their second best receiver in terms of receptions, and Cooper Kupp is Cooper Kupp, obviously. But they've struggled offensively, and they've struggled in the second half of games as well. So this is another team that needs a win, but a team that I think the Niners can go in there, and I think that defense can really kind of punch him in the mouth. And we've seen Stafford get shook as it is with this Niners D. So I think as bad as it was in week 3, this game can go either way because the Rams are not clicking on all cylinders at all right now.
Yeah, the Rams offense hasn't been impressive in terms of rankings. They're in the 20s, just like the 49ers are. Like you said, Matthew Stafford has thrown 4 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. The team has scored 7 touchdowns on the season. Cooper Kupp has 4 of them, 3 receiving and 1 rushing. And like you said, their run game has not materialized at all. And so, that game Sunday night looked like a game between the 4th and 5th ranked defenses by DVOA, right? It was a defensive struggle. And I have to look at this game and think this game is going to look very similar. I think the first team to 20 wins if a team gets to 20. I think 20 is like for me, if either of these offenses against the opposing defense get to 20, that's going to be an impressive performance to me. The Rams put up 20 against the Cardinals. The Cardinals defense, nowhere near what the 49ers are putting on the field.
Yeah.
And so, and so I have to think that they're gonna force at least one Matthew Stafford interception, and part of that is going to be their pass rush is going to get home, because the Rams offensive line is not great right now either. But granted, the 49ers are now without Trent Williams for, they say 4 to 6. I would imagine it's more like 6 to 8 with a high ankle sprain for a 300+ pound individual whose best attribute is his mobility. I hope that they don't try and rush him back. But I look at, see, here's the problem though. I look at the Rams defense, and it's good. You know, Jalen Ramsey is Jalen Ramsey. Aaron Donald is Aaron Donald. And when you have two of the best players in the NFL on the defensive side of the ball, or Aaron Donald, who is arguably the best player in the NFL, period, your defense is going to be good. And Aaron Donald last week got his 100th sack. He's the quickest player in NFL history to get to 100 sacks at, I believe it's at the defensive tackle position. I don't think that is including edge players, but I'm not positive. But I look at this 49ers offense, and I think about Colton McKivitz playing left tackle, Mike McGlinchey playing right tackle, Spencer Burford, who had a pretty bad game against the Broncos, and Aaron Banks, who has been really good this year. Brunskill is practicing this week. He could be back, but is that going to be at center, or is that going to be at right guard? We don't know yet. I just don't see where this team is going to generate offense. I just don't. I don't know. The Rams know how to defend this offense with Jimmy Garoppolo at the helm. They showed how in the NFC Championship game. Right now, granted, the 49ers had a lead, so let's not forget that. But when it came down to crunch time, what did they do? Well, they did exactly what the Broncos did. They crowded the box. They crowded the middle of the field, and they dared Jimmy Garoppolo to beat them outside or deep, and he didn't, or he couldn't, or however you want to say it. I have to imagine that we're going to see a lot of the same. So where are they going to generate offense? Right? They're not fast to the edges right now because they don't have Elijah Mitchell, and they're not effective running the ball inside the tackles. And do you really want to run the ball at Aaron Donald? I don't. And I don't think Kyle Shanahan does. And so again, where are the 49ers going to find offense? That is what I cannot figure out right now. And so we recorded on Monday. I also recorded later that night with my buddy Tim on our Denim Dungeon podcast. And we tried to predict the score. And I said 20-17 San Francisco. But the more I'm thinking about it, I don't know how San Francisco can get to 20. Tim predicted 21-13 LA. And I was like, there's no way this LA offense puts up 21 on the Rams. And he said, oh, part of that 21 is a pick six. I was like, oh, okay. Well, that makes more sense, right? Yeah. So that's the thing that I can't figure out right now. And I this game could be like 13-10, to be perfectly honest, based on how both offenses are performing right now. The 49ers have the better defense, but as it stands right now, the Rams have a slightly better offense because they have the better quarterback and they have Cooper Kupp. So what will be interesting to me is, how does DeMeco Ryans handle Cooper Kupp? He has the secondary now where he could theoretically just shadow him with Mooney Ward if he wanted to, right? Charvarius Ward could just like the Rams do with Jalen Ramsey, just be like, hey, you're on that guy, right? No matter where he's at, you're on that guy. I think they could, but it'll be interesting to see where it's at. Here's the one thing though that gives me a silver lining, if you will, a little bit of hope. Under Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo, the 49ers are 9-1 after a loss. There's only been one time where they have lost back-to-back games with Jimmy Garoppolo as their starting quarterback.
Technically,
that's cool.
Technically, two, the Super Bowl to week 1.
The Super Bowl to week 1. Yeah. But in the regular season, that was regular season. 9-1 in the regular season after a loss with Jimmy Garoppolo as their starting quarterback. So, they have an extra day to figure it out, right? They're playing Monday night. So I do have faith in Kyle Shanahan, and Jimmy Garoppolo can't play worse than he did Sunday. So there's good news there. But like I said, I just don't know where they're going to generate offense. Where do you see them?
So, well, I'm looking at it this way, because where I see them generating offense is Debo, Kittle, Ayuk. I don't understand how you can't generate offense, but I'm looking back to last year, Monday night on last year. The Niners came into this Rams game. They were 3-5. The season
they were down bad. Yeah.
Ending. They had scored 10 points against the Cardinals, 18 points against the Colts in the rain, 33 against the Bears, but that game was a slog. You had the long Debo run. That wasn't like they went in and lit it up for 33. 17 against the Cardinals, and one of the ugliest performances I can remember, when we were like, the season's over. The sky was falling. And then they played the Rams on a Monday night, and they went 31-10 out of nowhere. And that sort of
literally out of nowhere.
Out of absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
And that started the trend. Now, I don't think they're going to win 31-10 again. You look at the last 2 times these two teams met. They beat the Rams 27-24 last game of the season, where they came back, and then they lost 20-17. And yeah, I think it's going to be right and around there, right? 24-20, 20-17. I think it's going to be that kind of game again, for sure. But I do hope that Kyle, coming into this game, what he has on his mind is getting the ball in the hands of his playmakers.
Yeah.
So get Kittle the ball. Oh my God. How has George Kittle only had 17 catches or 19 catches, or whatever it's been his last 7 games? How is that possible? Get Kittle the ball. I understand Trent Williams isn't there. I understand you're going to need him to block at times, but you could also put the ball in his hands. Same thing with Debo. Same thing with Ayuk. Get these guys the ball. Let them win the game for you. Let them make plays. And if you're Jimmy, dude, take a couple shots, man. They're there. They're there to take. Just try. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think if they do that, I think they could get a few big plays. And here's what they're missing with Trey, and we talked about this. Trey Lance can be terrible throughout a game, and he could still hit 2 big throws and win you a game.
Yeah.
Right? He can be 11 for 25, but hit 2 bombs, and hey, they won 17-13 because their defense is so good. Jimmy has to make plays. He has to make a few big plays, and he couldn't do that last week. And I think if they can do that, they'll be okay. I think that's where they can get their offense.
Yeah, and we had talked about it, leading up to the season. Trey Lance didn't need to be as efficient as Jimmy Garoppolo because he has the big play ability. Right. Jimmy Garoppolo can only succeed when he is efficient. And it's really hard to be efficient game over game over game, because you're talking about a razor thin margin.
Yep.
And so if Jimmy Garoppolo can find it within himself to just let loose a little bit and like you said, at least try, right? He threw one pass more than, I think, 15 yards in the air against Denver. And I believe that was to Danny Gray. And he was streaking down the sideline. It was a terrible pass. It went out of bounds. It came nowhere near him. Right. But I remember I tweeted, I was like, essentially like, hey, at least you tried. Like I was excited to see that. I was like, it didn't do anything, but I was excited to see Jimmy Garoppolo at least try, right?
How long was the pass to Debo that he underthrew? That had to be over 15 yards, right?
I guess that's true. That was I think that was 20. I think Debo caught it, or maybe 25. Yeah, but again, underthrown.
It might have been a touchdown, but
yeah, underthrown. If he'd have thrown it 27 yards in the air. And I think, honestly, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is in his head. And I think he's been in his head for quite a while now. And it's to me, it's a fear of failing on those plays, or a fear of throwing interceptions on those plays. And when he plays like that, he gets nowhere, right? When is he at his best? When he's fearless throwing over the middle, right? Let's be fearless in throwing outside the numbers. Let's be fearless in throwing down the field, right? Look at the tape from last week, see some of those routes that were coming open, know that they're likely going to come open again this week. Why? Because defenses are playing you very similarly to the way that Denver did. So if you know that going in, if you're Kyle Shanahan, be in his ear. Hey, look for this guy on this play if they jump it, right? Just be prepared. Be prepared for these guys to come open, because in a Kyle Shanahan offense, somebody will. And then just get them the ball.
All right, Brian, what's your score prediction this week?
I'm going to stick with 20-17 just because, like I said, I think the first team to 20 wins. I told you I don't know how San Francisco gets there. So I'm going to say that part of their 20 is a defensive touchdown or a special teams touchdown.
You're saying they're going to win 2017?
20-17, yep.
I think they're going to win too because they have to.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's as much of a back against the wall game as it can be in week 4. I feel they're going to win. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I don't think it's going to be like that 31-10 game. I'll say 23-17. They pull this one out. And maybe it's a late touchdown or a late score that does it, but I'm gonna go Niners in this game because I think it has to go that way. So
well, and not only that, but Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo can not be ready or prepared to put that kind of performance on national television in back-to-back weeks. Yeah. They just can't.
Yeah, people are
too prideful to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think it'll be better. I think it'll be better this week for sure. All right, we'll be back to react to all of it for sure. For Brian, this is Al. Thanks, everybody.
Later.